Hello, everyone. Um, yeah, so Stranger Things season 5, the final episode just came out. Was really looking forward to seeing that, as a lot of people were. And yeah, it seems like a lot of people were pretty let down by it, myself included. There were a lot of good parts in it, but definitely didn't shape up to be what everyone thought it was going to be. And to be honest with you, the hype of it was so high, I don't think they ever really could reach that mark. But it seems like a lot of people are out there kind of, crapping on the episode and, explaining why it was bad. And a lot of people have, valid takes and stuff. But I kind of wanted to just go through and, share a few things that I would change for like improvements. Like if I were the ones, or if I was, the Duffer Brothers and directing everything and editing everything and what I would have liked to see. And I think these changes would have overall improved the lead up to the grand finale and the grand finale itself. Um, so anyway, I think I kind of liked everything. I think everyone had a good reception on episodes 1 through 4. The volume one drop. Everyone was pretty happy with that. The hype for it was really real, especially at the end of this, episode 4 when Will stopped all the Demogorgons and everything. Everybody was super hyped about that, and so I think everything up to that point was pretty good. In all honesty, um, it was just after that volume 2, it really felt rushed in my opinion. It seemed like they were just trying to get this thing wrapped up, and I kind of even on episode 7, I was really questioning if they're gonna be able to wrap up the story, fulfillingly, with only 2 hours left by the end of that, and yeah, I think they kind of missed the mark a little bit. Um, so anyway, where I think things kind of started going wrong was in episode 6, where Nancy and Jonathan were in that room, that melting room. Uh, they spent a lot of time with them, confessing and kind of airing out their dirty laundry and everything. And I think that whole scene was pretty decent. I think that was pretty good. But they really made it seem like they were going to die. They made it seem like they were in peril. I didn't necessarily think they were. At least Nancy. I knew Nancy was making it to the final episode. Um, Whether she was making out of there was a different story, but I knew she had to make it there. She was such a key player with all the being able to use the guns and weapons and stuff, and they really ramped up her fighter abilities. So I knew they were going to make sure she made it there. But Jonathan, I was kind of unsure of. I really thought that he might not make it out of this one. And to be honest with you, I don't think he should have. I think what really would have stepped that episode up was Jonathan essentially, everything playing out to where way it did, and then right when they're about to accept their fate like they were, that's when Steve and Dustin were there, and but they didn't come through the wall. They came through the top, and they were peeking down at him. And I think if they would have made that change and had Jonathan have to hoist Nancy up to save her, and essentially Jonathan being the only one stuck in the room, and maybe they were looking for a ladder or something to save Jonathan, and they just didn't make it in time, and he was completely covered, or whatever, or maybe that's when he brought up the ring, or something along those lines. I think that change there would have made a big difference, to the setup for the grand finale, and even just that episode, the ending of that episode itself. It would have really set the stakes that, hey, they weren't kidding. These guys are people, and they're really in danger, and not feel like they all have this strong plot armor, which is really really what everything ended up feeling like. Unfortunately, it seemed like there was no way they were gonna kill these guys off, and especially like mid fight. I was like, yeah, that no one's gonna die. No one's died yet. Um, they just kept baiting us with it, And I really wish they didn't. But yeah, episode 6, I think if Jonathan would have been boosting Nancy up like on his shoulders or something, she made it out, but Jonathan didn't. They couldn't find a rope or a ladder in time, and Jonathan ended up getting stuck in the room, and he didn't make it. I think that would have really made a difference, um, especially for Joyce and Will. I think that would have really fired them up leading up into the final episode or the final fight. Yeah. So jumping forward a little bit, the next thing I really think that could have been a little better was the tower scene when everybody made it to the top of the tower and they're waiting for the abyss to, you know, descend upon them, and they're realizing that the rift isn't lining up and it's going to crash, and that whole thing. I think that was pretty suspenseful. Um, but as we know, Steve got knocked off and almost died, and Jonathan was there to save him. And if he would have died in episode 6, he would not have been there. What I think would have been a much better play out would have been if Dustin had been the one to reach out and grab him. And I know Dustin would not have been strong enough to pull him up there, but he could have bought him a little bit of time, and then Lucas and the others could help pull Steve up to safety, and that not necessarily be where he died, but that could have been where he almost died. But at that pivotal moment where he reaches out and grabs his hand and catches him, I really think they should have had Dustin say the "you die, I die" while he's holding on to him. I think that would have been very powerful, and would have uh, would have played out really well. Um, but yeah, I think that would have made a big difference there as well. So jumping forward just a little bit further, to where the girls are getting beamed by the helicopter and the soldiers are right behind them and everything. And then Murray gets the idea to grab the C4 to blow up the helicopter. I think all that played out well, but yeah, I really thought they were going to sacrifice Murray here. He grabs the C4. I kind of put two and two together when he strapped the grenade to it. I don't think that grenade should have been there. I think he should have just had the C4, and I think you should have had to have manually detonated it by jumping into the helicopter, and that would have been his sacrifice. I love Murray. He's one of my favorite characters. I do not want to see him die, but I think that would have been very powerful. That would have been a great way for him to go. He really didn't have much purpose in the story past that. Um, so I think that would have been a great arc for him, going out that way. It would have felt like his sacrifice meant something. He, did it to save the 11 and 8. And even though I guess he wouldn't have known that, but maybe they could have edited it just a little bit to where he might have been aware of that. Maybe Hopper said, hey, we're held down by the Huey or something over the radio. Something along those lines could have made him aware that they were pinned down, and that's where he knew he was going to need to sacrifice himself. So that way they had a shot at saving the world. And I think that change would have made a big difference, and could have really wrapped up Mary's story pretty nicely. So now we're about an hour into the episode, into the finale, and we finally make it to Vecna and the Mind Flare and all of that, which I think was good pacing. I think everything up to this point was pretty good. Now we're expecting a great finale, a great a fight, and unfortunately it was cut pretty short. I think the whole fight only lasted about 10 minutes, which is insane. These guys were supposed to be, at their peak performance. Vecna's just all season talking about how much more powerful he was, and he just gets taken out in about 10 minutes, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, so I think most of, the lead up to the fight and even, the beginning of the fight was pretty decent. for the most part. I like how, you know, Eleven came in and she rushed into the Mind Flayer to face off with Vecna, even though I'm not entirely sure how she knew Vecna was in there. Um, but most of the way things played out, I think I would have, you know, kept the same. Even the length of the fight, I think, would have been decent if they did something else, which I'll hit on in just a little bit. But yeah, I think her getting in there and then having Will sit back and you know, control Vecna was all, you know, pretty good. Um, but the whole team fighting, you know, everyone else fighting the actual Mind Flayer themselves, was a little weird to me. This thing was huge. Their plan, they, you know, came up within 30 seconds. It seemed like, I don't know how they got up the cliffside. It just seemed like there's a lot of flaws. And the other big thing was there's no Demogorgons. There's no other creatures, um, which I know would have really you know, messed up their plot armor there. I don't think there's any way they could have fought the Demogorgons and Demobats and everything else on top of the Mind Flayer. So um, what I think they probably should have done was maybe show them like way off in, you know, a cave or a hive or something, just way off in the distance, maybe far away from the Mind Flayer, and maybe the Mind Flayer was like, you know, had to call them in, and you know, they're running towards the, you know, to protect the Mind Flayer, but they're just too far away, and you know, that's when this whole battle takes place or whatever. I think that would have been a pretty good explanation as to why they weren't there, and still keep the team pretty safe. Because I mean, let's be honest, they would have had no chance if even if one Demogorgon was there, they would have had no chance with that and the Mind Flayer at the same time. But having them way off in like a hive somewhere, and you know, all of that, because I mean, to be honest, there was no reason for Vecna or the Mind Flayer to feel like they were really in any danger. Everything was kind of going according to plan up until like, you know, 20 minutes ago, if that, you know, 10, 20 minutes ago, when L got her, you know, got Vecna out of the ritual or whatever it was he was doing. So, you know, there really wouldn't have been a reason for them to have all the Demogorgons and everything there. Maybe have them all around a rift or something way off in the distance. I don't know. But that's probably one of the things I would change. Um, and then yeah, the fight itself. I think it was decent. But I think the next thing I probably would have changed was when Will took control of Vecna. You know, right before Vecna was about to attack 11. That's when Will stepped up and, you know, stopped him. I thought that was pretty good. That was great. Um, but it seemed like there was no like consequences. Like no one really suffered any consequences to anything in the fight. No one was hurt. No one was injured. No one was like mortally wounded. Nothing. Everybody was perfectly fine. And I think where they could have made a big difference was, I don't think they should have killed off Will here, because you know, Joyce would be and him would both be suffering that from Jonathan, you know, just a couple episodes ago. But you know, when his eyes went white and he was in control of Vecna, and then you know, 11 actually kills him, skewers him. Um, Maybe they should have made Will go blind. You know, his eyes would have just stayed white, and that way, you know, another main character didn't necessarily die, but they would have been permanently injured or altered. Um, I think that would have been something that would have, you know, a decent change. And then as far as like the fight with the Mind Flayer with the rest of the team, I'm not too sure how much could really change. I mean, I did like how they were all working together using, you know, fire. I'm not sure how much damage they realistically would have done with all of that. But it was pretty decent. And obviously, you know, Jonathan wouldn't be there, so we'd have to have, you know, Steve probably on the flamethrower. And then I don't know if Nancy should have made it out of there. I don't know. Probably wouldn't let her make it out of there. I think the one thing that might have changed a little bit different was the fake out with Dustin, how it looked like he was going to get squished, but then he didn't. Maybe either, you know, have his leg get caught or something, or, you know, or maybe even just keep that the same. I don't know. I don't necessarily know that they should have killed off Dustin per se there. Maybe. I don't know. I do think someone else should have been pretty hurt during that fight, though. Um, and that would have made it feel like, it was more of a victory, that they almost made it, or maybe most of them made it, or something along those lines. It's kind of hard to say, because there's really not much those kids could have done against that thing. The thing was ginormous. I don't know how, we're really meant to believe that they actually took it on and took it on that quick. Um, when like full militaries couldn't kill just one Demogorgon. Like it's crazy. So after the fight and everything, they defeat the Mind Flayer. And Vecna's, on the spike. I really liked what they did with Joyce and how she was the one to finally take him out, get that closure. I think they did a great job with that, especially with the recapping of everything that happened up to that moment and the trauma that he caused for all of them. I think they did a really great job with that. I would not change really anything after the fight up to where they start leaving the Upside Down, and they get ready to blow it all up. But this is where I would really start to change things. So, um, I don't think I was the only one, but I really thought there was going to be another fight. I thought there was going to be more to it. I didn't think it was going to be that easy. The military knew that they were in the Upside Down. They didn't really go after them though. Like you'd think there'd be a whole bunch of people waiting for them. That wasn't there. You'd think that the team would have came up with an escape plan of some kind, before setting the bomb off. Now that they knew that Vecna was dead, the Mind Flayer was dead, and so on. They weren't really under any pressure. It seemed like, so you think they would come up with like an escape plan. Okay, there's a good chance the military is going to be waiting for us when we leave the portal. We need to figure out what are we going to do, how are we going to escape. uh, they didn't have an escape plan, which is really crazy to me. To be honest with you, I think it was just kind of rushed over in the writing and everything, but it just doesn't seem like the team at all. It seems like they definitely would have had an escape plan in mind of some kind. But anyway, this is where I think they really failed. I really think there should have been a second fight with the Mind Flayer, just the Mind Flayer. Vecna's dead. His head's gone. He is 100% dead. I think like when they released the kids and we saw the smoke kind of go up and off, nothing really came of that. Uh, so like it's just weird. You Yeah, and every like real instance of the Mind Flayer we've seen, with the exception of like season 3 when he made himself kind of a you know whole, uh, he's been like this big smoke monster, and they didn't have that at all. So I think here when they're in leaving the Upside Down, they set the bomb off, they come up with an escape plan and everything, how they're going to deal with the military, and then as they're leaving towards the portal, that's when they notice the Mind Flayer coming from the abyss. That would have been epic. And now they would have to hurry because they already set off the record. Like it's too far away to go back and change, to stop the bomb or anything. It's too late. Um, and then this is where they might have seen the military coming in, or maybe there was like a blockade or something, waiting for the military right there, keeping them from exiting the portal anyway. And now they're kind of sandwiched. They're in between the Mind Flayer, which is on their way to them, and trying to get into Earth, get into the right side up and everything. Then you have the military, and this would have been a huge epic fight, that probably could have lasted, they could have easily stretched it, 15, 20 minutes, um, of this fight between that. And, obviously L's the only one that could have had any chance of stopping the Mind Flayer. And, you know, then, everyone else fighting the military, then maybe the military starts trying to fight the Mind Flayer. This is where Demogorgons start coming in, and, that further, disrupts the military. I don't know. But I think they could have done something way better than what they did with just leaving the portal and getting caught. That was pretty lame. Um, but yeah, if they would have went that route, and L, say Dr. K could have been killed here, which I think we all wanted, and it's pretty disheartening that she didn't have anything really happen to her. But maybe Demogorgon would have killed Dr. K, or the Mind Flayer would have infested her or something like that. I don't know. And then a lot of maybe all the military guys got wiped out by the Demo Bats and Demogorgons and stuff, and it's just the team who are right next to the portal, and Elle who's holding back everything. Maybe this is where she shows her true power, and she's holding back all. Maybe Will's controlling the Demogorgons, and he kills them, he wipes them out, and then Elle's holding the Mind Flayer, and she's the only one that can do this. And that is the reason why she dies. That's the reason why she stays in the Upside Down until the bomb goes off. That's the reason why she is sacrificed. I think would have been so much of a better ending for Elle than what we got. Um, it's like what happened didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but having that closure, that end, that finale, last little boss fight, would have really churned up the series, and really would have I think made a big difference to how everyone received the way it did end. And everyone would have been able to been sad about the people that died, but they would have understand, okay, this is why Elle died. She died saving everybody, and there was no chance that anyone else could do it because she was the only one that could. Um, and then obviously wipe out the military people, and that would have also solved the problem of them just getting away scot-free from the military, because no one would have been able to report their findings or anything, because everyone would have been dead, with the exception of our team and what's left of them. Um, I think that would have been crazy, and way better than what we got. So obviously, all this extra fighting and death and destruction and everything else going on would not have left a lot of time to wrap things up the way they did. They spent probably about 45 minutes or so kind of wrapping everything up, tying everybody's stories up and everything. And I think they did a pretty good job. I do think they did a little too long on the graduation thing. I'm not sure that should have been there at all. But I think overall they did a pretty decent job kind of wrapping up the story. But what I really think they should have done is kept the 2 hour episode like they would have, and kind of like ended it, go right up to about the hour 45 mark with the fighting, and then left about 15 minutes to kind of slowly taper off the story and cool everything down. They, whoever's left is left, and everybody's victorious and all that kind of stuff. And then what they really should have done was had an hour, maybe an hour and a half bonus epilogue video that they didn't tell anyone about. They didn't disclose to anyone. That would have left off season 5 with 9 episodes. It would have just been this bonus epilogue where they would have wrapped everybody's stories up kind of the way they did, instead of trying to force and cram it all into the final episode of season 5 like we got. I think that would have really done the story justice, and that would have I think most people would have preferred that and liked that, especially getting that bonus. Hey, we got an extra episode that nobody knew about, and we got to flesh out stories, and everybody's wrap up everything the way they wanted. I think it just would have been a lot better, but I don't know. That's not what we got. That's just as my kid take on everything. I feel like that would have been a really epic ending, and I personally would have loved that. So I don't know. Hopefully somebody else would have liked it as well. But anyway, I guess just let me know what your thoughts and opinions are of it. What you guys would have changed. Because that's what I would have. Anyway, take it easy.